morning, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of the 30 in 30. 30 questions in 30 days. All about live events, whether it's virtual, in-person, hybrid. It's a little sunnier outside than I was expecting it to be this early in the morning, but yeah, there we go. That may be a little better. It's really bright right here, right? Let's start with our first question. Well, really our second. Laura asked, what's the fastest path to getting over the fright of live events and how to create the impact I want without compromising my non-negotiables or lower income? And I love this question. Now, there's a couple of ways that we could potentially approach it. I'm not 1,000% sure if you're talking about the fright of, like what happens financially with a live event, or if you're talking about stage fright. I'm going to talk to stage fright really quickly, and I think just generally speaking, it's just practice. You got to start somewhere. But I will tell you this, I get a little bit more nervous, actually, for all being honest, I get a lot more nervous when I speak on an in-person stage than when I speak on a virtual stage. Especially over the last couple of years, I'm a lot used to speaking on Zoom with a large number of people. And as a result of that, when I get on stage for a virtual event, that even if it has, thousands of people, I feel not much different from a stage fright perspective than when I'm getting onto a Zoom call with a client team. I have spoken on a couple of in-person stages since the pandemic, and every time I get on an in-person stage, I feel like I'm actually more comfortable. Listen, there's a lot of upsides to virtual, and one of those upsides is the fact that the feeling of public speaking is a little bit different and a little bit safer, if you will. I definitely am a huge fan of virtual, especially if you're just getting started. But then let's talk about the financial fear. An in-person event has a lot of costs associated with it. You've got your hotel, you've got your audiovisual, you've got food and beverage, you've got team travel, you've got swag, you've got extracurricular activities if you have guest speakers. Now, when you go to virtual, of the things I just mentioned, really guest speakers is the only cost that's associated with it. So one of the really cool things about virtual, Barry and I often call it the democratization of live events. And that's because virtual has made live events so much more accessible for so many people, especially if you're just getting started. And it's so much easier to do, right? Even if you're hosting a small event, let's say for 20 people, if you're going to do that in person, you have to rent a small conference space. Maybe it costs you $500, maybe it costs you $1,000 to $1,500, depending on the venue, depending on the city, and how big a room you decide to get. And maybe you buy coffee for everybody to get things rolling. And that coffee is likely going to cost you somewhere between $80 a gallon if you're at a low-end property to $150 a gallon if you're at a high-end property. Now, you think the cost of gas is expensive. How about that for the cost of a gallon, right? $80 to $150 for basically water and coffee beans? Wow. I mean, it's delicious, but that's not hotel coffee. So, when you're just getting started, you've got those expenses. Now, you probably want to record yourself. So maybe you're going to pay a camera guy to come in for the day, and let's just say it's a one-day event. So we've got, let's say, $500 to $1,000. Let's call it $1,000 to call it even for the hotel. That'll probably cover a gallon or two of coffee. If you're going to have a camera guy come in and film you, it's probably going to cost you $500 to $1,000 depending on where you are and depending on how experienced that camera person is for the day. So let's call it $1,000 to get you somebody to come in, to mic you up, to film you so that when you're presenting for your one day, everything is in place. From there, maybe you have some printed materials that you want to give your attendees, and let's say you spend $10 a person on printed materials, maybe a small workbook of some sort. That's another couple $100 for 20 attendees, right? By the time all is said and done, that small little one-person event for 2,500 or for 20 people, it's probably going to cost you about $2,000, $2,500, somewhere in that range, especially if you're going to get it recorded. If you go virtual, you eliminate almost every single one of those expenses. Because if you do what we recommend, right, which is to host your virtual event on Zoom, first off, you get the recordings through Zoom. Now, all of a sudden, you've eliminated your camera guy because you're just going to use the little camera on your computer. You've eliminated the hotel expense because you're doing it from the comfort of your home. Your attendees are doing it from the comfort of theirs. And you've also eliminated that $80 to $150 a gallon for gas, or well, for gas for you, which is coffee. You could probably buy, a whole coffee machine for the price of a gallon of coffee at a hotel. So, I said coffee, that reminded me that I wanted to take a sip. We didn't cover printed materials in my little, side-by-side example, but if you're going to be doing printed materials, the reality is that's a PDF, right? You're not likely to send printed materials to your attendees, but even if you do, right? Even if you spend 10 bucks a person on printed materials for $200 and you spend another $10 a person to ship those printed materials to your attendees, right? That's still $400. That's with shipping printed materials to your attendees so they have something tactile in their hands. $2,500 versus 400 bucks. The democratization of live events is real. Virtual has made it so much more accessible for so many people. I think it's a pretty safe bet. Hopefully that helps you to get over the fear of the cost of an event. So there you go. There's question number 2 of 30. How do you get over the fear associated with live events? Now, I didn't really address your non-negotiables, Laura, because the reality is I don't know what your non-negotiables are. But given the fact that virtual gives you a lot more control over the experience, a lot more control over the expense, and a lot more control over the results of your live event, I suspect that you'll be able to squeeze your non-negotiables into a virtual event so much easier and so much less painfully than you can with an in-person event. I hope you found this information useful, and if you want to get your question answered, what I'd love for you to do is head on over to askblueanything.com, and over the course of the next 30 days, I'll be answering your questions one a day in this 30 and 30 video series. So I'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.